Hi folks, my name is David. I'm the minister here at Erskine Parish Church. It's great to have you connecting with us, and I'm so glad you found our online resources. If you were to come into our physical church, you would get one of these welcome packs, so consider this your digital welcome. However you've joined us, we'd love it if you could like and subscribe to our platform. That allows you to continue to see when we're putting up new content. And also, if you'd like to get in touch and actually connect with us, you can email at epcnotices@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. I don't like doing maintenance of almost any kind. It's a bit of a pain to me, and I'm sure many of you know the experience of when you're driving along and you hear a bit of a rattle under the bonnet of the car, and you think, I don't know if I even want to look and see what that is, because it could be an 800 quid rattle or a 50 quid rattle, but there's kind of a warning sign. And I can be really bad at taking them. Where was it? There was the verse about the fool who runs headlong into the danger and pays the simple keep going and pay the penalty. That can be me. I love my running, and just now I'm not able to run. I've got something called Achilles tendonitis, but I didn't wake up with that yesterday. It could take me ages before I can run again. What happened was I started getting a slight pain in the bottom of my foot when I was running, and I got that months ago, and the pain got louder and louder and angrier, and I kept thinking, it'll be fine, I'll run through it. I'll run through the pain, and now I'm having to pay for physiotherapy. So I'm a living example of that proverb. But these little warning signs and signals and rattles, they show up in our lives, in our friendships, in our relationships as well. And what I love about chapter 27, with this little collection of sayings, they actually are quite carefully arranged. And you can see the groupings because they tell us something about the kinds of things that we should look for in relationships. And what I think is especially reassuring for us in the church today as we take the Bible seriously is that, again, there is a lot of ink spilled and a lot of money spent today on how to do relationships well and properly. If you can write a book on that or create a video series or a course, you can do very well, because everybody is wanting to know the answers to this, because as humans we are built for relationships and we have to continue to engage with them. But we also, because we're living in God's good but fallen world, we don't always do it terribly well. So there's always a market for helping people know how to navigate that a bit better. And there's a lot here. So I want to look at it under a few headings. I want to look at security in relationships, and then truthfulness in relationships. I want to look at terminal relationships, ones that you can't do much about, and finally, family as the relationships. Friendship as the family that we choose for ourselves. So we're going to look at truthfulness. No, we're not. Which was the first one? Oh, for goodness sake, it's all catching up with me. We are going to look at security, truthfulness, terminal relationships, and then friends as the family that we choose for ourselves. So let's look at security in relationships. Verse 2, let someone else praise you and not your own mouth, an outsider and not your own lips. You know the saying, charity begins at home? It's the same with friendships, relationships. Whatever you go into, it actually starts with you as an individual. And I know that maybe sounds counterintuitive and perhaps not terribly Christian, but let me illustrate it to you. You are an individual person made in the image of God, and understanding that is the best foundation that you can possibly bring into any kind of engagement or relationship that you come into. Because when you understand that, and the degree to which you understand that, means that you have this sense of wholeness and security in your own identity, meaning that anybody else that you come into contact and relationship with is not at risk from being some kind of pawn to help you find that. Let someone else praise you and not your own mouth, an outsider and not your own lips. That doesn't seem like a proverb about friendship until you realize that the opposite of that someone who needs a lot of attention, who needs a lot of praise, who needs constant reassurance and validation, it's not really a good basis for a friendship or relationship. And a lot of what I'm going to say to you today, you're going to recognize, and I'm seeing lots of half-grins already, because you know someone like that. Maybe you've been someone like that. But there's so much about having a sense of worth and knowledge of who we are in God, and that's much more broadly sketched out in the New Testament, that actually leads to a better basis for friendships and relationships. Now, there's a few things about that in this chapter. There's verse 19, as water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. Whatever you are at this moment in time, whatever you are in terms of your inner being, your beliefs about yourself, your securities or insecurity, whatever that is at this kind of state is what's going to be in a friendship or a relationship or a marriage. So there's no way to alter that. And as that idea of reflection, that applies to friendships and relationships, because quite often what they will do is they will bring up to the surface things that we weren't perhaps aware that were issues and that were somewhat disguised and mysterious to us. But when you put it into the pressure cooker of having to relate to another human being, then it comes right up to the top. For instance, I think I used this one last week, but I think it has a relative touch point for a lot of people. There's lots of people who think in their own minds, because they've read a course or they've watched a video, that they would be or are a good leader or a good boss or a good manager of people. And then the real test of that is they have to actually manage some people. And the test of it is not whether they still believe that about themselves, it's how the people under them or around them feel being managed by them. And quite often, there's more people that think they're a good boss, leader, or manager than there actually are good bosses, leaders, or managers. Because what is within them, their ability, their competency, their security in doing that is shown, or their need for validation and praise as somebody who's got to be a leader. There's nothing more terminal to an organization or a situation than somebody at the top constantly needing reassurance that they're doing the right thing and doing a good job. Do you see? So whatever you are, that's going to be reflected when you get into a kind of relationship situation. Now, the important thing about this is that there's a kind of way of the world that this is an unmistakable test of what is in there. This will be tested. How? Verse 21, the crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but people are tested by their praise. I think that's an amazing and profound insight, because so often we focus on the fact that your sense of security and who you are and your rootedness in life and your identity, that's going to be tested by hard times. And that's true. But what about the test of good times? Or what about when everybody is saying, well done, brilliant, that's such a great job? In some ways, that's actually a harder test to pass. Why do so many, whether they're famous footballers, celebrities of any stripe, why do they crash and burn? Why do their lives end up in chaos and ruin, whether that's financial ruin or personal ruin? Because it's actually very hard to pass that test. Most of us are not built to be able to endure unfiltered praise and adulation from even a few people, never mind the masses. That's actually difficult, because you need to be so rooted in your sense of self-security, who you are. For me as a Christian, I would say that's in being made in the image of God and loved by God. And that should be able to buffer you, not only from when people bring a lot of undue criticism, which is always going to happen, but when people bring overly fawning praise and make you question whether that's where your sense of self is. Because the thing is, that can change. That can go and that can be taken away at any point. But the love and the rootedness in being made in God's image and belonging to Him, that can never be taken from us. And that can survive the times when people are perhaps unfairly accusing us, and the times when people are flattering us and lavishing praise on us, sort of thing. And, you know, there's an application and a test for us in the church as well, particularly when things are going well. Something as a minister you've really got to watch out for, because people will tell you that, you know, a sermon's good and that you're doing a good job, and there's a sense of you've got to validate what people say, but you also can't be attached to that being where all your sense of doing well comes from. It's got to be that, and I think this is true in every area of life. What you're doing has to be pushed forward by your sense of calling, and that you're doing that for a purpose and a journey, and not for what people will say around you, because that's going to change all the time. So if you go into a relationship, that sense of security, God made me, God loves me, God knows me who I am. That means that I'm not going to look to the other person or the other people to top that up within me, because I'm fine. That means I'm actually more of a secure and a desirable person to be in relationship with, because I've got that kind of sussed, and I'm not a walking collection of red flags. And that means then that I'm not using them or looking to them, and that means that I can withstand criticism or praise. And all of this is actually possible. Although this seems unattainable, it is the wise life that's put down in Proverbs, because ancient people had worked out this is actually possible, and there's a kind of secret sauce to this in terms of navigating and living life well. And the first one here is having our own sense of security to go into relationships. But then secondly, truthfulness is seen as, in the wisdom tradition, essential to relationships. Verse 5, better is open rebuke than hidden love. How does somebody know that you love them? Hopefully you tell them. But how do they really know? Because you and I can say anything. You show them. It's the oldest affirmation that we know of in terms of love, that it's shown by what we do and our actions, as much as, and perhaps more, than our words. Because people use their words in all kinds of ways, and there's some intonation here about flattery and how dangerous and slippery that is. But love is actually demonstrated powerfully by the degree to which we sacrifice for someone, by the degree to which we are happy to demonstrate that we care about them and the causes that we'll take part in. For the church, that might be as simple as what we did in the last kind of year or so, that we were happy to show open love to where there was tension in our community through the hotel being used for folks, through the asylum-seeking process. But we were happy to show open love and to be counted with that, because it was congruent with our values and who we believe God has called us to be. And we didn't try to hide it, because not hiding it is actually really important. It's part of that wholeness that God looks for us, that whatever love, whatever sense of love that we have, that we actually showed and demonstrated. I think of the life of Jesus. He didn't actually spend a lot of time. He did say some really affirming things, but I think he went around a lot of the time showing it. In Jesus' day, to have table fellowship with someone who was something of a social outcast, whether that was the prostitutes or the tax collectors, and we're going to be thinking about that later in the year in the Gospel of Luke, he showed it. He demonstrated it. He did the open love. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Now here's the thing. We've got to show our love, but sometimes that love looks like correction, looks like a wee bit of put you on the right course. And Jesus was brilliant at this. He was able to see into the heart of someone where their dysfunction was coming from and to say it out rather than hiding it or smoothing over it or just counting it as not important. Here's the thing I want to say to you about in relationships. Correction is not terminal or fatal. Now, sometimes we can get into patterns of relationship that are very superficial, that are perhaps overly sweet. That can be a temptation. But genuine, heartfelt honesty and correction is so important to good relationships, because we live in God's good but fallen world, and there are going to be times where things are going off course. And a bit like a ship, if a ship goes off course a little bit, it's fine for the first few miles. Give it a few hundred miles and you're in the wrong port. It's important to have these small moments of correction openly, honestly, because that sets things on the right course again. And there's so much about integrity. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. In some ways, it's easy to be the person who's doing flattery. Flattery is actually easy because it feels good because you're saying nice things. Feels good for the receiver, and it also then it can be used as a tool of manipulation, which can be another pitfall you've got to watch out for when people are telling you you're great. Some people are very good at that, at getting people to do what they want through using the right combination of very sweet and flattering words. But ultimately that's deadly, because it's not really heartfelt or meant, it's just being used as a tool for someone to get what they want. So better than that is wounds from a friend. And the friendship is important because the wound, if you like, and it's a metaphor, it's not stabbing someone, it is saying something that temporarily is going to feel like an injury, but it's going to be like the surgeon's knife. It's going to lead to some healing in the relationship, in the friendship. It's going to lead to a good outcome for them because you're able to see something that they're not. I shared a bit about this last week, but some of the best course corrections in my life have come from people who have felt able to say to me, I think you're heading down the wrong course there. From small things to big things. It's so important, that integrity and honesty, but it's got to come from a place of actual concern, love and friendship. And I think this is what sets the Christian context of it apart. In verse 9 it says, perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice. You see, some people, you can't caveat for every possible interpretation, but there is a way to take this, and folks can go, oh, yeah, I'm great at speaking truth to power in all my friendships and relationships. And actually what they do is they go around and they just say what they want, and it's pretty horrible and nasty most of the time. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about someone who has that pleasantness like the kids had, tastes sweet. Being in their lives just makes everything more pleasant. That's the kind of person they are. And when you earn the right to correct and rebuke and to do that course correcting thing from the sweetness that you bring to someone's life. I'll say that again. You earn the right to correct and rebuke someone from the place of sweetness that you bring to their life. That's your credential and your qualification to be able to say to them, I think you might be doing something a bit wrong or on the wrong course there. If you're doing it because you can't stand them and you won't have a chance to go at them and you can see that they're wrong, that's not what Proverbs is talking about. So it comes from that place of, for us as Christians, we get this as a value. It's the baseline of love, of concern for the other, of wanting the other to do well and flourish. And that's why you're doing it, because you think this could be better. The organization that we're both part of could be better. All of this could be better if I bring those sweet, life-giving words that are clearly vested and loaded with my willingness for them to want to do better. It springs from their heartfelt advice, the pleasantness of a friend. And so there's truthfulness is absolutely necessary in relationships. The baseline of love has to be there, but then we need truth and we need correction, because we all have blind spots, and that's the thing, and that's why we're put into community and relationships and friendships together. But it's got to come from a place of love, and it should, if we're doing it well, it should have that sense of, that was life-giving. Like, when God, we thought last week about do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. If you have ever experienced that in your Christian walk in life and you've known God coming and intervening and speaking, perhaps asking you to lay something down, perhaps asking you to change direction, perhaps even just making you aware of some sin, it doesn't feel deadly and it doesn't feel terminal. You know that he's done it out of his great love for you, and he's enabled you to move on, to feel his love, forgiveness, and to flourish in the rest of your life. That's the way of the gospel, and that's the way we are to embody this connection and this sense of relationship as we apply truthfulness to our friendships. So that's truthfulness in relationships, as well as security, the security that we bring. But what about are some relationships beyond, when you open the bonnet and they say the head gasket's gone, the engines, there's no point, you need to go and get a new car? Are some relationships beyond repair? I don't know if you thought I was going to take on the really nasty passage in this, but I am. Verse 15, a quarrelsome wife is like the dripping of a leaky roof in a rainstorm. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with the hand. First thing I'm going to say is that the text reflects this time. It's written thousands of years ago in a culture unlike ours. I'm no proponent of misogyny, and I accept that that's how it reads and how it jumps off the page at us. What I think that the author has done is taken one example of something that's universal, and this happens to be the example. They've taken the quarrelsome wife. Quarrelsome wives exist, quarrelsome husbands exist, quarrelsome friends of both genders exist. What I think the best application for us of this is that we go to what it's saying about the solution, that there is none. Restraining that person is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with the hand. Let's put it together with another verse. Stone is heavy and sand a burden, but a fool's provocation is heavier than both. It's unliftable. It's unmanageable. So, there are some people in life, which is illustrated by a quarrelsome wife in this passage, but it's anybody who cannot get enough of conflict, of drama, of quarrels. They get up in the morning, they live for it, they find it. If you're married to them, whether they're a man or a woman, that is what they enjoy the most in life, is a really good rammy. And it's exhausting because there's an emotional tax to be paid for that. Or if you're in any kind of situation, it's the person who's always got to speak and has always got a problem and got to find fault with something. That is exhausting to deal with repeatedly and continually. And our temptation is to often go, right, what does he say? Grasping oil with the hand. Have you ever tried to do that? Sometimes you knock over kind of olive oil or something and you think, oh goodness, and you realize it's futile, but you go anyway to try and see if you can stop it. Or trying to fix the dripping of a leaky roof in the rainstorm. When we had that storm, nobody tried to go out and sort their fence while it was still blowing. You can't. It's impossible because you're going to, in fact, I spoke to somebody who did, and they soon found out it was impossible. Okay? The point is that if some folks have this as their raison d'etre, as the reason they get up, whether it's to start fights, whether they've got a kind of tendency towards foolishness and making stupid decisions, and you have tried to go talk to them, try to reason with them, try to get them to not make the stupid decisions, try to ask them to stop fighting with you and quarreling with you for no reason, and then they maybe gaslight you and say, I'm not fighting, you're the one who starts, right? The Bible is giving you permission to cut off the relationship, to stop getting into that dance with them, to move on, because here's the thing, and I've been listening to a podcast by an author and speaker called Mel Robbins the last couple of weeks, and it's full of gold, but she's got this theory that says let them. And the idea of that is you cannot control another human being, and it is ancient foolishness to try to do so. Think about it. Any time the good and effective changes come about in your life and you've grown and matured as a person, did somebody else force you to do that? No. There was an openness and a willingness to your own heart. And you see this from folks who maybe have beat addiction and so on. They woke up one day and they hit their rock bottom and they said enough was enough. Or anyone who's changed their life, or anyone who even comes to faith. There's a sense in which you realize I've had enough of my sin and of living one way or living without God, and I wake up one day and I go, I need God. But your heart is ready and open and receptive to that. Nobody is coming. Or if somebody is coming, and this affects our this wasn't in my notes, but this affects our evangelism as well, because we think, oh man, if we could just get people into church. You know what? Let's leave the Spirit of God to lead people's own hearts, to bring them into church. And hopefully when they're here, which I think you are brilliant at as a church, is then we welcome them. We say, we're glad you're here. But we can't browbeat them or push them or use any kind of weird tactics to get them in, because it's people's own hearts. And if someone's own heart is intent on quarrel and conflict and never wants to change, then there's nothing you and I can do about that. And maybe for your own mental health and sanity and peace, maybe you just need to let them. Maybe you need to leave them to it. Maybe that's not the godly thing to do. Maybe that is the godly thing to do, because that's what's going to send the loudest message that they've ever had, is that someone actually lets them. Because, you know, folks that are endlessly foolish or attention-seeking or quarrelsome, do you know what they've been used to their whole lives? Is if they continue in that behavior, people do come around them and keep giving them the supply that they need for their quarrels. And there's a kind of weird dynamic and dance that human beings get into. Or the person who posts the attention-seeking Facebook status gets a string of comments saying, "Are you okay, hun? PM me." And the people are out there, and you're thinking, why are you doing that? It's obvious they're looking for attention, but they've got the people ready to do it. So, let them. It is like trying to grasp oil with your hand, trying to control them and change them. So maybe this is the permission you need for some terminal relationships to realize that there's nothing good that can come out of it. Because do you know the thing about a relationship, and a godly and a biblical one, is it's two-sided. It's two-way. There's give and there's take. And if you've got none of that, then some of them are just for the bin. terminal relationships. And finally, family, friends as the family that we choose for ourselves. Do not forsake your friend or a friend of your family, and do not go to your relative's house when disaster strikes. Now, that's all a bit cryptic, so I'll just focus on, for time's sake, better a neighbor nearby than a relative far away. Ultimately, we all have, as the book of Proverbs shows, decisions and choices to make about who we'll surround ourselves with, who we will engage in relationship and friends with. And sometimes our biological families are just that, our biological family, and there's so much about it that's less than ideal. And if we have a good one, brilliant, amazing. It's a gift from God and to be celebrated. But it's nice that the scripture speaks to those who necessarily don't find that, because better a neighbor nearby than a relative far away. Some of us have not geographical distance, but emotional and relational distance from our biological family for lots and lots of complicated reasons. But the beauty of being in this world, and even of the biblical teaching, is that that doesn't need to be the end of the story. It's still possible to have deep, enduring and meaningful relationships, despite perhaps the dysfunction that we were, the hand of dysfunction we were dealt in our families. And so we are able to pick up and do all of those things, have security in ourselves and in our relationships, have truthfulness and honest and meaningful relationships with folks who aren't necessarily our family. Do you remember when Jesus was teaching some folks, and they said to him, and his biological family come along, and this is all in the Gospels as well, I think it's in Matthew chapter 18, and they say, "Oh, Jesus, your ma's outside, and she wants a word." And he says, "Well, I'm busy and doing my thing." He says, "Who are my mother and my brothers and my sisters, the people here who are taking part in the kingdom of God with me?" And on a personal level, I think that gives us permission to build those relationships, to not feel bad about the fact that some of our most meaningful connections and relationships, the people that we've built family with, might not have a biological connection to us, but nevertheless, there's this understanding, there's a warmth, sometimes there's a sense that you feel like you've known them for years, and it's a beautiful blessing, and sometimes even a replacement if we haven't had a great experience of family. But also, I think that's a great word to us in the church. I love seeing when the church works well, and I've been blessed in my 5 or so years here to see it many times in Erskine Parish, that people who have no other connection to each other than they live nearby or they go to the same church, and you're really there for each other when the chips are down and checking in on each other. And I think that's the aim of what church is supposed to be like. I think that's where it's headed. I think that's what God builds through the church in the first century. I think that's why it's still strong today in expressions of church such as the one we're in, because we genuinely care about folks that we weren't born into the same family as, and we show that sense of, well, we're in a community together. We're on a mission together for God, for people to see the love of God, and that's what bonds us and binds us, and that is just as important and can even in our lives become more significant and important than the bonds that we were born into. Ultimately, the book of Proverbs has ancient wisdom, which our world is still searching for in terms of relationships, the security that they can and should bring, the security that we can feel in ourselves going into them, the truthfulness that they should embody when they're going well and functioning highly, the fact that some of them are beyond repair or terminal or hopeless to try and do anything with, but ultimately that all of us can have the blessing of knowing what it is to belong to a family, regardless of our circumstances, because God has put a lot of goodness and folks out there, and sometimes it's just about finding our people, but it's something that we're able to continue to make progress towards, and if we find that, to give thanks to God for it, because every good and perfect gift comes from Him. May God bless His word to us this morning. Amen.